What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 77 of the Foundation First Fitness Show with Bobak Owen. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been able to roll out a solid episode. This episode 77 was supposed to be a joint episode I was supposed to have a guest on this episode. We recorded the entire episode. It was an unreal episode. I've said episode like 9 times. And then what ended up happening was something went wrong with with the tech here, and we ended up losing everything. So all the recording, the whole thing was basically just like muted. All I got was the sound coming from the mic, which wasn't enough. So we had to basically reschedule to kind of redo this again. So I had to kind of bump something up, shift some stuff around, and put together an episode 77 to kind of make up for that. So today's topic, really interesting stuff, kind of came up in a discussion with a friend of mine who's actually doing some triathlon work, who's actually a triathlete. He's an amateur triathlete, but he's putting in a lot of work into it, and he's really passionate about it. So we had this talk as he was kind of curious about whether, in terms of how long and when he should be training, and a lot of this stuff came to be because simply what ended up happening was when you are training, when you are doing some kind of multi-sport training, or you have an off season, you're trying to train for your sport, one of the biggest issues is we always really talk about whether a lot of the cardiovascular work, so all the cardio training we're doing for our sport, is it going to be, or that we're doing outside of our sport, is it going to be carried over into our sport? And is there going to be some pouring over effect from doing multiple different disciplines in that same event? So if you're taking someone, let's say like a triathlete who's biking, swimming, running, how much does the effects of the cardio from the running affect the swimming and affect the biking? Like how much pour over and carryover is there? And that's really what cross training is being able to train for one sport and have some of the benefits translate over to the other sport. As a rule of thumb, there is some carryover. So there is quite a bit of transition from one sport to the other. The amount and the percentage of which that carryover will happen is highly dictated by the similarities of that sport. Different similarities are going to come from different things you're going to be doing. So before we really get into that stuff, I'm going to be talking a bit about one of the main things that usually happens is when someone is getting into this and we're comparing something like biking, swimming, running, what we do is we see the similarity in terms of the overall goal of the sport. The overall goal of that sport is to really last as long as we possibly can. So it's basically a pure endurance sport. When we do something like a specific sport, like a goal-oriented sport that's a little bit shorter in task, where it's like, goal-oriented, like scoring a goal is essentially the end game, or scoring a point is the end game. Those sports are usually confined into shorter blocks depending on the sport. Soccer's a little bit longer, hockey is a little bit shortened up, there's shifts, this, that, the other thing. Tennis there's breaks, even though it is continuously going, there are breaks in between. So depending on that, the type of cardiovascular training that you're going to be doing is going to be really important for basically that sport and being able to kind of last during that sport. But when you're doing it, how much of it is carrying over is really going to come down to the similarities of that sport. So one great example that I like using is when I talk to a lot of hockey players about, the cardio training that they're doing during the summer. Now, a lot of my athletes run during the summer. I like having them run. The reason why I get them to run is because they spent a lot of time during the season, as a hockey player in a very tight hip dominant position. So they spend a lot of time tight in the hips. And what that's causing them to really not be able to get the purest function out of their hip. What that's going to cause is over the years, we're going to start developing a lot of these movement dysfunctions and a lot of injuries. We're talking about hip injuries, groin injuries, things like that, back injuries. A lot of these things come about from poor function and overuse. Now, I make my athletes run so that they can gradually start getting the proper function of these muscles. The body is designed in terms of cardiovascular activity to do two things: run and swim. These things are survival. We're more designed to run than we are to swim. Swim, we need some kind of a technology to move forward, which is basically the water. The water has to be there. We don't move. Running is more natural. So the only two that really don't require technology is running and swimming. Anything else is really going to start requiring some kind of technology to be able to function. So because of that, it's putting your body in a more natural position because it's a more natural form of movement. So I like to get them to run simply because it allows them to really expose the hip a lot more. Is there going to be the same amount of carryover to hockey as something like cycling would, as biking would? No, it won't. It's going to have probably more beneficial effects in terms of injury prevention, but in terms of carryover and performance, no, you're not going to see it. And the reason you're not going to see that is because in hockey, you spend a lot more time in a crouched position, whereas when you're running, you're staying up straight. So the demand on the legs is not exactly in the same place. Running, you're going to get a little bit more. You're going to get a lot more hamstring. Hockey, you barely get any hamstring. It's literally just trying to slow it down to the best of its abilities, slow down your leg to the best of its ability, but it really isn't doing much to help, especially at the angle that it's at when you twist it and turn it. It's so shortened to some extent on some way, and it's not a powerful muscle. So in that respect, so running is really going to help balance out the muscles. So it's going to carry over, but it's not going to carry over completely. What does happen is then it shifts us down to thinking about the specifics in terms of the metabolic systems that are being used and the muscular endurance. So what I was talking about in hockey, muscular endurance was basically the types of muscles that were going to be used. How efficient is that one muscle firing in that direction? So hockey, you're skating out, you're pressing out, whereas running, you're really nice and tight. When you look at biking, swimming, and running, biking is very, quad dominant, so when you are a cyclist, usually high performance cyclists, you'll notice a very, very, very powerful quads, very weak hamstrings. And that's really coming from that tight hip position and a lot of the pushing action coming down. Because of that, cycling can, to some extent, get some carryover from the running, not all that much, because again, like hockey, it's a quad dominant sport. You're in a tight hip position. You don't get the same exposure to the same muscles. So running and biking are going to have some similarities, and that's going to be coming from the metabolic systems because you're going to be able to train the cardio in that way. You're going to be able to train that nice oxidative system, that long stretched out system. You're going to get that from the running. You're also going to get that same systems working when you do, did I just say oxidative system? It's so bad that I'm blanking on this. Jeez. Yeah, you're going to start using oxygen. I can't even remember the name of it. My whole brain just blanked on that completely. I never usually talk about that. I talk about it in windows of time, so I never really talk energy systems. Aerobic system. Wow. Oxidative system. That wasn't even the right word. Sorry, guys. The aerobic system. Wow, that was bad. I guess I'm going to have to brush up on my terms. So when we are talking about which energy system is being used, the aerobic system is very much going to be dictated by, how long you can last with each, in terms of how much oxygen you can really consume and utilize over a length of time. But the energy that you're going to need for those types of movements are going to be heavily dependent on the types of muscles that are being used as well. So biking, running, and swimming, completely different. Every single one of them is very different. So essentially, to try to kind of bring it all back together, is he was asking me if his running was going to help his swimming, and would it be important for him to start swimming soon? Would it be important for him to start swimming later? And yes. Yes and yes, there is a risk of, not getting the right cardiovascular training in if you're not in the water training it the way you're supposed to. And yes, you should start sooner because yes, you're getting some carryover. Yes, you're getting some carryover from your running, but because, swimming is such an upper body dominant sport, the cardiovascular training and the VO2 max training that you've done from running is going to still require a significant amount of muscular endurance to be able to be utilized, because if your muscle can't keep up and basically keep up and generate enough power over that length of time, it doesn't become easy enough and you're not efficient enough, your VO2 max is going to be peaked way in advance. So you're not going to be able to use it because your muscles have already burnt out. So you need to train the muscles, which is why running, cycling, and swimming are like three completely different sports, which is why a triathlon is such a grueling event, because it really requires all these different it requires the same quote unquote energy system, but from so many different movement patterns that it becomes a very, very taxing event. So when it comes to something like hockey, when I make my athletes run, like I said, the only thing they're really going to be getting from it is just a good cardio workout. So the cardio is going to be to some extent maintained. Do I put them on the bike? Yes, I do put them on the bike on occasion to be able to maintain their leg strength while they're taking some time off the ice, so that their bodies are not getting constantly beat up, so that their groins are not taking a beating from always being on the ice the entire year. This is a way for us to really train. And I also like throwing in some things like a sled or something like that, because I'm bringing them down into that 30 to 45 second sitting in a crouch position, but still pumping the legs and running. So they're still getting a little bit of running action, still training the muscles the way I want them to some extent, but getting a little bit more of that burning sensation in their legs and being able to generate that power output that they need over that length of time. What is the most important thing to take away from this is that, yes, there's carryover, but if you want carryover to be somewhat similar, you have to replicate two things: the length of time that you're going to be training whatever you're doing, the length of time your body's under tension, or the length of time that you're doing that physical activity. So basically, are you skating for 45 seconds but running for 2.5 hours? Those two are not going to carry over the same way as if you were skating for 45 seconds and then doing a 45-second shuttle run. Those are going to carry over much better because they're training similar energy systems. And the second thing is the muscles that are being used. So the dominant muscles in that specific movement. So like I said, if you're a skater, cycling and running, cycling for hockey is much more similar than running for hockey. So you're going to get more out of the muscular side on the cycling. You're going to get more cardiovascular work out of the running, because your legs are not going to be your weakest link in there. Now, for triathlons and running and stuff like that, it's very tough to really get that much carryover. And honestly, I would say that if you're going to, you really have to start touching on all three, because running itself is not really going to be, is probably the least taxing on your body in terms of how much damage it's going to do to your body, but it still requires a significant amount of skill to be able to manage all three and not kill yourself and not be burnt out before you even get close to the date of the race. So I would say gradually build it up. I would say start with your running and then try to introduce swimming and try to introduce cycling and then swimming as soon as you possibly can. The thing about swimming that you're going to want to pay attention to is your shoulders. That's a topic for another day, but potentially start, gradually bringing up that endurance and gradually bringing up your swimming distances, because it is really going to make a huge difference. If you're only relying on the cardio work that you're going to be doing while you're running and biking, it won't be enough. It won't be enough to help you in that triathlon. The swimming will definitely destroy you, and you'll be out of gas before you even get to the run or the bike. So on that note, if you have any questions, I know this was a little bit of a complicated discussion because there's so many moving parts here, but I tried my best to wrap it up at the end. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. Leave a little comment in the description below. Yes, I'm really looking forward to the next couple of episodes. We're going to be talking about a couple of different things, hoping to get some guests on in the next couple of weeks to really get some interesting topics going. We'll really just start pumping out more episodes of this podcast, because I think as we start nearing the summer, it's going to be, people start getting out, start training a little bit more, getting a bit more active, and the information is really, really valuable. So stay tuned for a few more episodes coming in the near future. And until that next time, and until the next episode, keep building that foundation team.